We love them in a way we never thought we could love anyone. And they love and trust us in a way that no one else ever will. And then one day we wake up, and they're as big as we are, ready to go out in the world and make their own way and hold their own babies in their arms, completing the natural order of life. But for many of the children you just saw, the natural order of life will never be completed. Some have already died. Some will one day join the ranks of the working disabled. And others will grow old and die in state homes with the bodies of adults and the brains of babies. For these children, and for countless others around the world, the natural order of life has been forever changed by man-made viral and bacterial vaccines they were required by law to use. I always begin with those words because for too many children, the risks of vaccination are 100%, due to the fact that their parents had no voice and had no choice. But today we do have a voice, and we do have a choice. And many of you who came to this National Autism Association conference today are here because you want to be an effective voice and make well-informed healthcare choices for your child. Those of us with DPT vaccine-injured children who co-founded the National Vaccine Information Center nearly 28 years ago knew how high the price can be when parents do not have the information they need to make one of the most important decisions of their lives. And that is why our work is dedicated to preventing vaccine injuries and deaths through public education and defending the informed consent ethic in medicine. In 1980, when my first baby, Chris, reacted to his 4th DPT shot, I didn't know the significance of what I was witnessing. My pediatrician had not told me how to recognize a vaccine reaction. We didn't have computers or the internet. There was no information about vaccines available to the public except in medical libraries, and back then, nobody but doctors went to medical libraries to do research. When I took my healthy, precocious 2.5-year-old boy into the pediatrician's office for his 4th DPT and oral polio vaccinations 26 years ago, I remembered the red-hot, hard lump that came up at the site of the injection after his 3rd DPT shot and stayed there for weeks. I told the nurse that day that he still had slight diarrhea from a 48-hour bout with the stomach flu he'd had when we were at the beach 3 weeks earlier, where a doctor had prescribed antibiotics. None of this mattered, she said, as she injected him with his 4th DPT shot. And when within hours of that shot, I found Chris in his bedroom sitting in a chair, his face white, his lips slightly blue, staring at me as if he couldn't see me standing in the doorway. And when I watched his eyes roll back in his head, and I saw the whites of his eyes, and then his head fall to his shoulder like he'd fallen asleep sitting up. And when I tried to wake him, and I couldn't, so I carried him to his bed, a dead weight in my arms, where he stayed motionless for hours. And when I was finally able to wake him, but found he couldn't sit up by himself or walk or talk coherently, and when I carried him to the bathroom where he had violent diarrhea and fell asleep in my arms and then slept for 12 more hours, I kept thinking all the while that maybe he was coming down with the flu, a relapse of the flu that he'd had earlier, or maybe he was just tired from going to the doctor's office where uncharacteristically he had fought with every ounce of strength he had to get away from the nurse trying to give him that 4th DPT. That day and night, I knew what I was witnessing was unusual, but never once did it occur to me that when I saw his eyes roll back in his head that it was a seizure, or that when his head fell to his shoulder that it was a classic post-pertussis vaccination collapse shock known as a hypotonic hyporesponsive episode, or when he would not wake up for hours that he was unconscious and undergoing a mild brain inflammation that in the following days, weeks, and months was manifested by the inability to do things that he could do before the DPT shot, like count from 1 to 20, or recognize the upper and lower case alphabet, or identify the words in the books that we read together every day, or play with his beloved deck of cards, which he had memorized by the age of 2 and would call out by name. A college education